So you mentioned something earlier about if a church is thinking about moving toward an executive pastor, how they should be forming maybe the job description or thinking about that position as it relates to the senior pastor. And so one of the questions that we got from a pastor knowing that we were going to shoot this was, is it the size of the church? Is it a budget? What parameters should a church be working through as they're looking to hire an executive pastor? And is an executive pastor maybe the direction that they should be going, or is it an associate pastor? Is it a job description that they should be thinking about, or is that maybe an older way of thinking, and should they be just saying, let's find the right person, get them on the bus, and then create the job around them? So you mentioned it, but I'd love to hear everybody think about that.
Sure. Well, everything starts with vision. So I think for the optimal clarity, let's start with the vision. So I would say to anyone dreaming about, hey, should we have an executive pastor? I would just start with, what's the vision of the house? What's the vision of the church? And then what do we need to do to build a team to fulfill that dream? I think that's a vital question. Yeah. And then you start developing what are we looking for? And the pastor is so important. As Jeff mentioned a moment ago, if he's super detail conscious and likes to be involved in the details, you have to be careful selecting an executive pastor who that is his grace lane and hyper focused on that. You want to make sure there's chemistry with a leader. So what is really needed for the vision? And I wouldn't start with a job description. I would just start with, what's the vision? What's the need? What would add value to our senior pastor and this staff? What kind of leader? Because there has to be a cultural fit, and chemistry is everything. You can be a gifted leader, but if you don't have chemistry, especially at that level, we've talked about trust as a non-negotiable, humility, brokenness, loyalty. So when you're building out this parameter of here's what we're looking for, I would definitely start with the vision and what would complement our senior pastor, what would allow our team to accelerate. And I would ask, what's keeping the team from thriving? Mm-hmm. What's needed? And if you come up with, well, we really need an executive pastor who will oversee the team, lead the team, and build systems to accommodate the vision, that gives you clarity.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that? Since, one of the thoughts that I had was what really distinguishes between an executive pastor and an associate pastor, and you've mentioned, that you kind of bridge those two divides in one office. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to what you were saying. What's the vision and what's the need, right? So, I think, like we talked about, our three roles are similar, but they're also different, So it's not as much title as being the difference, but really what the focus is, And so, to me, I think if you carry the title of an associate pastor, you're seeing more as the pastoral side to that, and maybe not as much the execution systems, side to that. From the associate pastor, I think part of that's the context of your church. Like, what does that title mean? Was the associate pastor everybody was the associate pastor of students or kids or whatever, so that may carry a different role. But I think, there's just a really fine line, I think, in what the difference is between executive pastor and associate pastor, because every church is unique. Every culture kind of has its own needs. So, I would go back and just say, put that and the job description down in the conversation. But really more is, what's the need? Where could we feel the most benefit for our lead pastor as well as the team? And then begin from that point to look at the competency, the skill sets that you think would be helpful for that role, and then lean one way or the other.
Yeah. And sometimes we all think that we want somebody to come on our team because we feel overwhelmed. There's too much. We want to share the workload. Yeah. And then they get there and we're a little hesitant to give away responsibilities. So I think pastors need to process that as well. Are you just feeling a crunch right now
Sure.
to where a consultant could come in and help with this, or you could pay a specialist to come in and just do this one task, like rewrite the bylaws, for instance. That doesn't equate to needing a senior pastor.
Yeah.
They can pay someone to accomplish that task, to provide counsel on that task. Because if you bring someone on the team, you're going to have to give things away, and are you going to be okay with that? It sounds good at times, but sometimes it's painful.
Well, and I think too, just to be a good steward of those resources too. I mean, you know, there's a cost to employing someone, you know, full-time, part-time. There's benefits to be considered. There's the bandwidth. There's the chemistry of the team. There's all kinds of things to be considered. Where, and you mentioned bylaws. So not that this is a plug for UBA,
Right.
but we help churches, you know, write bylaws and do consulting projects and stuff like that. And we're a lot cheaper than hiring a staff position for a single task. And so most of the questions that come to my desk are in kind of that range. And so some of the churches that come to me and say, we're going to hire an executive pastor, most of the questions that I ask in response are, for what? Like,
Right.
to do what job? And if they are more team related or vision execution, then those are the churches that I tend to encourage, yeah, go down that road. Or if they're like, I need this question asked, or I'm always asking, you know, for this, or we're coming up on this big task, I'm like, you need a consultant, you know,
Yeah.
you need a friend in this moment.
Or a better administrative assistant.
Or yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you need these things executed. You really don't want another person on the bus. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's all kinds of variables to consider. So let me ask you this, you know, and feel free to tell war stories, change the names to protect the innocent or the guilty. Best part of your day, worst part of your day?
So to me, the best part of my day is seeing vision come to reality, seeing ideas move to that implementation, especially in our team. You know, seeing somebody on the team, you know, excel and achieve or accomplish something that was before them. You know, seeing somebody grow. So we've entered into kind of a strategic planning season, and the biggest part to that was helping us as a team move from that idea to implementation and really getting just a unified approach to that. And so we've worked with a company and came in, and they're all similar, you know, when you look at it, but so they led us in a process of creating VIPs, like vision initiative projects, and so for the first one, we chose our girls minister, 24 years old, to run that cross-functional team, to really help us look at our guest experience. And that's not really her, you know, what she does every single day, but we're just wrapping up that first, you know, VIP, and she's just knocked it out of the park. And to see like that come alive in her, that leadership, just that confidence, you know, to me, that's the best part. I think the hardest parts it's the conflict side. You know, it's the people challenge, especially if somebody's not working out. How do you walk them through, you know, in the right way of being, you know, full of grace and truth, and having to navigate some of those conflicts and those difficult situations. It's just not fun, but it's necessary and it's part of it. So I would say those are probably the two extremes for me.
Yeah. You're smirking because you're already thinking of a
He's
story.
much more spiritual than I am. Yeah, I was like, get on with it. I think I don't know that I would answer too differently than what you shared. I think it's when someone gets it, when you can remove a barrier for someone and they can run full force and they walk out of your office just fired up, and then you see it come to fruition, man, that's a good day. I think when we can stack hands on a particular issue that we've been navigating for a while and walk out of a room back to back, that's a good day. Yeah. When you see or hear a story of someone placing their faith in Christ and then getting baptized and then getting into a one-on-one discipleship relationship and getting connected to a life group, that's a great day. I think the hard parts are when, you know, you want to hire people that you have to rein in versus have to drive.
Sure.
But that inevitably leads to silos, and it's easier for me to do my thing versus get sidetracked and build a team and da-da-da-da. And so the hard times are the communication challenges that are incumbent with that of, yeah, you ran off this direction, but you violated these three people's world and made life more difficult for them. And,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it happens innocently, of course, but it's just, those are the frustrating things like, man, how many times do we got to go over? You got to communicate. There's more of the frustrations.
Yeah, I would affirm both what Zach and Jeff have said so well. When you first asked the question about the best part of your day, the hardest part, most difficult, I thought about, the first thought I had was Carey Nieuwhof's book, At Your Best, where he talks about green zone, yellow zone, red zone, and just how my day's mapped out. So anything that happens in my green zone is usually really good and amazing, even if it's tough or if it's conflict resolution. Yellow zone, a little more challenging, but when things are happening during my red zone, when I'm not fresh, when I'm not creative, don't have as much energy, we normally reserve the red zone for, email and other meetings that don't require high level thinking. But I would say that anytime your core values are being demonstrated through your staff or church members, and for us it's godly, effective, and excellent. When we see godly, effective, and excellent being lived out, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's in a planning session, or an event that has been executed well, launched well, just seeing the core values lived out is just really life-giving. That's a tank filler. Anytime in meetings where we're having a shared language, so we use Integris profiles, and so that's part of our shared language. We leverage the leader dashboard. That's a shared language that we have. And so, for me, that's a tank filler, whether I'm in my green zone, yellow zone, or red zone, when you see that unity, that continuity, because of the complexity that we deal with daily. But one thing that's so refreshing, and this is any day of the week, and we've been in every size church in America, but what we've discovered in our ministries that we can say with integrity is the active ministry never changes. Mm-hmm. That the next person we meet is the most important person on the planet. And as we embrace that posture, that it really just doesn't matter what happens during the day. As Jeff said a moment ago, if your schedule's interrupted, if you have to, as Zach said, deal with a difficult situation, if your posture is the next person I meet is the most important person on the planet, it just changes your heart, your attitude, and you don't see them as an interruption. You see them as an opportunity that God's at work, and even if it's a difficult conversation. And I would say probably the most difficult is when it's related to a termination. Mm-hmm. Someone that you invested in has drifted, hasn't responded to leadership or executive coaching, and they just couldn't make the turn. Those are hard meetings when you have to sever a relationship or say we're going in a new direction. So, you've heard the theme of flexibility today. I think there's a reason Jesus said, be a new wineskin, stretchable, expandable, flexible, interruptible. And I would say if you aspire to be an executive pastor, or if you want one, if they're not a new wineskin, they're going to rupture.
Yeah. Tell me again a really good, the good moments, somebody gets, somebody's thriving, somebody's freed up, how have you experienced that in your ministry?
I think in lots of ways, Stephen, you were talking about just kind of the shared culture of what you've created. So we've really spent a lot of time investing in the culture coming out of the pandemic, and we had some staff turnover and that kind of stuff. And so, we needed to work on what we did, but what was even more important for a season, and I think always is something to manage, is not just what you do, but how you do it and how you do it together. And so, probably one of the biggest things we're celebrating right now is that we are in a really good spot in terms of that culture, and we're seeing people own the vision. We're seeing people own the values and celebrate those and exemplify those, you know, in their own way, and pass those things along. So as kind of a cultural architect, which is kind of part of what I think we do at times, it's really encouraging to, you know, to get to see that. And then to see, like, you know, like we talked about, to see somebody like thrive, you know, whether it's we remove an obstacle and we see it happening, or, you know, we shift somebody in their job description to where they're really passionate and really gifted, and maybe they were struggling a little bit in this role, but then you move things around a little bit, and then you see them, you know, thriving. I mean, that to me is probably one of the most encouraging parts, is really seeing the team become who they can be and what they can do, and then seeing the results of that and how it not only affects them, but how it affects the ministry. And then when they're in that position, just seeing the impact. You know, so I mean, like, most recently for me, that's one of the things that I keep in the hard days, keep coming back to, and finding those stories. And, you know, like Lauren, our girls minister, or, you know, Tracy, our women's minister, and just, you know, looking at people who have come into the team and have found their spot, and God is using them in really powerful ways.
Yeah.